So, for those who don't know me, my name is Melina Bondy. I use they, them pronouns. I live in Toronto or Toronto. I have been practicing with the Insight tradition for about 20 years and the Plum Village tradition about 22 years. I have gone pretty deep in both. I was a monastic in the Thich Nhat Hanh order of Plum Village tradition for, well, I was nine years in robes. Um, And I've also been blending insight practices with the Mahayana Thich Nhat Hanh practices for almost as long as I've been practicing. I've probably done about a year of silent retreat time cumulatively and have a deep love for many traditions. I've been studying with Thanissaro and Kittisaro the last few years, who are deeply engaged teachers who are rooted in the Thai forest tradition, but also blend in Chinese Chan. So it was kind of perfect for me. And Don Mauricio, who's one of the guiding teachers here, is a part of their teaching team. And of course, I did the community Dharma leaders training through True North Insight this last round. And I actually started the round that Molly and Norman had led 12 years ago, because I was connected to them when I used to live in Guelph before I was a monastic. So it's really nice to reconnect to True North Insight as it grows and evolves. And I'm happy to meet you all. For this evening, I wanted to share on the theme of self-power and other power. And you don't need to know what that means. I'll introduce the concept and applications as we go. But first, for a meditation practice, you're really welcome to be in whatever posture works. Sitting, standing, lying. We'll go for about 25 minutes. And then I'll probably share for like 20-ish minutes and then have another short practice before we open it up. So just let yourself be in a posture that's comfortable, that you can stay in. There's some stability. You can have your screen on or off, your eyes open or closed. Really, please, I find it can be helpful to know, okay, here's how I usually practice. And right now, what would support wakefulness and ease? So we'll start with 3 sounds of the bell and then guide us through what I call mountain, wind, sky practice. I've learned through some different Theravada teachers, but I know it has connections to Tibetan practice. Just letting ourselves tune into the ground where the body is touching whatever surface is holding us up. So the touch points. Be feeling the pressure, the temperature, contour of whatever the surface is. Noticing if there's tingling or pulsing or numbness. And whatever surface is holding us, that surface at some point is held by the earth itself. And we rest a little more into this earth holding us up. Let the bodies that might have done a lot of work today find some stillness, find as much ease as can be found. And there may be a lot of thoughts spinning, emotions whirling. There may be blankness, a tiredness. There may be curiosity and interest and some joy. Whatever we're arriving with is very welcome. And what's it like to start by letting all that happen as these bodies are held by the earth, the ground beneath us. Maybe aware of the sits bones, the thighs, the feet. If you're lying down, the back of the head. And the very immediacy of these earthen bodies, and also the vastness of the whole earth holding us. And attention will go elsewhere. And just like any practice, when we notice that attention has moved away from where we're intending it to be, great, we've noticed. And then gently invite it back. And here, finding a sense of the spine, uprightness if we're sitting or standing, length if we're lying down. We find a bit of stability in the spine. And also noticing the breath, the side body. Sometimes just a micro shift of almost leaning back and down, or at least setting awareness back and down. Sometimes that's a helpful way to come into practice. Resting on the earth, held by the earth. And also this dignity, this uprightness, this uplift. You may stay with the felt sense of the body. And if You wish you may add an image of a mountain. Can we let our bodies be like mountains? Part of the earth, held by, but also the earth itself, not separate. And kind of finding our stability through the resting as opposed to forcing a strident concentration. Instead, relaxing into, resting into present moment awareness. At some point, we'll likely notice the movement of breath through the spine, through the belly, chest, maybe through the whole body. You may rest at a particular spot where it's most accessible to just witness the movement of breath. And maybe open into the whole experience of the movement of breath through the body. Softness of belly. Letting awareness be open and grounded. Flowing and still. And if an image is helpful, you can add this image of our breath is like the wind blowing around and over the mountain. They're intimate and close, but so that there can be both the stability and the movement. Every time attention shifts, wanders, goes somewhere else, the moment of noticing is the moment mindfulness has been reestablished. It's a moment of celebration. It's a moment of encouragement, success, if we want to use that kind of language. And then we invite attention back to dwelling in this mountain-like body and the breath that moves free as the wind over the mountain, around and through the mountain. attending to the felt sense of the body and movement of breath, or just movement of breath, just felt sense of the body. That may be enough of an anchor. You're welcome to stay in the exquisite simplicity of just sensations, just breath, if you wish, just touch points. If you wish, you may also open one more layer into this awareness of mind. What is the quality of mind now? Not the specific individual thoughts and emotions, but the overall quality. Crowded, agitated, smooth, clear, variable, rapidly changing. And this is where, in our image, the mind is the sky. Consciousness itself is the entirety of the sky, and the thoughts and emotions passing through are like weather systems. They happen, they affect things, and the sky is so much bigger than what passes through it. So like I said, you may want to stay with touch points or breath for the next 10 minutes or so. But if there's some curiosity and enough stability, what's it like to briefly open to awareness of mind itself, awareness of the consciousness? What is it that notices thoughts coming and going, that notices sensations coming and going, sounds coming and going, breath coming and going? Grounded, fluid, and spacious. Maybe luminous. Changing. So opening to all of it, or perhaps visiting the mountain. Wind. Sky. Vast open sky. We'll continue mostly in silence for the next 10 minutes. Body resting like a mountain, breath moving like the wind, mind vast as the sky. Body like a mountain, breath like the wind, mind open as the sky. If you've been still, you might want to gently bring a bit of movement back into the body. If your eyes have been closed, gently maybe allow sight to return. Maybe keep your eyes closed. Maybe stay still if that's what you want. Yeah, take some moments. Just a note that I actually have notes written on paper. So if you hear any little funny sounds or see my hands doing something, it's because I'm actually shuffling papers. So yeah, tonight I wanted to get to share about self-power and other power, which are terms from Japanese Pure Land Buddhism, and I will get to them. But I want to start with the night of Ananda's awakening. Does anyone know who Ananda is, or have you ever heard of Ananda? Okay, great. Some yes, some no. Um, Ananda was sort of the foremost attendant of the Buddha's cousin, who is said to have had the most tremendous memory. And just by listening to a discourse of the Buddha, he remembered the entire thing. And so he was very both beloved and very important in the community at the time of the Buddha and through the centuries of transmitting the teachings. Ananda shows up often, and the word or the name Ananda means bliss, which maybe gives a little sense of how a lot of us think of him. He's very caring, known to be a really excellent attendant, and probably for like 20 years, the Buddha's main attendant. So really, was steeped in these teachings with such privilege and such opportunity. Ananda is said to be also the one who intervened when the Buddha's aunt and 500 women came and asked for for ordination, and the Buddha had turned them down. So goes the story, at least some stories. And then Nanda came to the Buddha and said, "Why did you do that? Can't women attain full awakening?" And the Buddha said, "Yeah, of course." And for patriarchy and whatever else was going on, he had thought the Buddha had thought that it wasn't going to be a good situation socially to go ahead and do this pretty radical thing. And Ananda asked him 3 times, which is the tradition. If you ask something 3 times, then someone has to say yes. So it is Ananda who is also beloved by the nuns communities for being an ally way back when. Um, so it's just a little bit about Ananda. So this like beloved, beloved being, so caring, so devoted to the teachings, the practices. And it is said that by the time that the Buddha passed, Ananda still hadn't reached full awakening. And about 3 months after the time of the Buddha's passing, there was the first council was convened to sort of systematize the Buddha's teachings, to collect everything that everyone knew and go, what are we going to do with all of this? Because the Buddha didn't systematize things. He just walked around and taught stuff, depending upon who he met, depending upon the questions that were asked. Um, And over 45 years of teaching, there was one heck of a lot that got shared. So the monastics, the monks, because of course those were the folks in charge, about 500 monks gathered. So goes the story. 500 monks gathered 3 months after the Buddha's passing to systematize, to collect, and kind of decide how to move forward. And it was to be only fully awakened monastics, monks to come. But all of them said, yeah, that makes sense, except Ananda has to be there. No one knows more teachings than Ananda. But we also want to have only fully awakened people to like understand from the inside what this is all pointing to. So they decided, okay, we're going to have Ananda come. And Ananda was feeling so bad because he had been trying so hard to reach full awakening. He was so dedicated, and yet it eluded him. And so the story goes, because of course these are all stories passed down. The story goes that on the night before the council was meeting, Ananda had been like staying up late, practicing, hoping to like finally crack whatever enlightenment it is. And he couldn't, and he gave up. And as he went from sitting to lying down before his head touched the root of the tree or the pillow or whatever his head was touching, just before it touched, he woke. And I love this story because there are so many times and places in my own life when I have strove, worked far too hard, tried, something feels elusive. And then it's in the giving up, or the letting go of the striving, that the answer comes, that the healing comes, that the transformation comes. Um, and I want to be careful. It's not to say like a full giving up, I quit, I'm leaving, but the like, I don't know how to do this anymore. I have to let go of my strategy. That kind of, we can't even force ourselves. It's usually some sort of a rock bottom, breaking point, usually really hard, but so fruitful. And so I hear that in the story of Ananda, and I have great love for this story. And I guess I feel like if there's any chance of awakening for myself, it's going to be the Ananda style because I don't have the natural capacity for like deep concentration that a lot of the early awakened ones are said to have had. But there are other paths. And so this also makes me think of a story that Thich Nhat Hanh told often, which is he was teaching in Korea. Um, I think it was around 2010, so in the later late years of his life and teaching. Um, and when he would give public lectures, lead retreats, and then also lead walking meditation in a whole group, in a park, in a city, as a practice that we also do at the monastery and in the retreat centers all over the world. It's not the back and forth sort of pacing that we usually see in the Theravada tradition, but a group, slow, mindful walk with pauses through the woods, like I said, wherever we are. And so Thai, which is the Vietnamese word for teacher, so what we call Thich Nhat Hanh, Thai was getting ready to lead hundreds of people. Actually, I think there's a few thousand people for walking meditation. Um, and there were so many journalists there. They kind of like formed this wall in front of him, taking photos and trying to document everything he was doing. It's a very popular attraction for the media. And he was actually a very shy person. And he found it very overwhelming, so much so that he kind of hit this overwhelm of, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like there isn't even room to take a step. And in that moment, he had to get started and he didn't know what to do. And he just tuned inside and found the Buddha within. I said, Buddha, I don't know how to do this. Please find a way to let this walking meditation happen. And the moment he tuned in and said, I don't know how to do this, Buddha, please help, enough space parted for him to take one step. And that's what he did for the entire is I think about a 45-minute walking meditation around a city block. And it's another version of we try and try and try, or we try to figure out what to do. And there are limits to this personal effort. And sometimes in the letting go of our usual strategies, that is where possibility opens up for what we didn't know we could accomplish or was possible. And this, I think, relates to how we meet anger and rage and fear and depression, confusion and agitation. So often we try to practice with it, and sometimes mindful breathing will calm it down. But then other times it just like it won't stop, no matter all the tools that we use. And it's this surrendering to what feels impossible that can become this awakening, this opening. And that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this topic. Which brings me to the actual title of Other Power and Self-Power. This comes from the terms from Pure Land Buddhism from the medieval period in Japan. The terms are Dariki and Jiriki. If you know any French, I think of tu and je. So Jiriki, like je, is self-power, and tu or Tariki is other power. Uh, and these terms came about to describe approaches to the practice, to the Dharma. Pure Land was just starting to form at that time, which is a more devotional kind of practice. And what was the common and popular version, or the popular version of Buddhism at the time, was the Zen, that had a lot of rituals, a lot of emphasis on cultivating your ethics, cultivating your concentration. It was practiced by the elites because it cost money to get the priests to do the different ceremonies. And then it was practiced by the monastics in these conditions that a lot of lay folks, a lot of average folks didn't have access to for long periods of study and sitting and practice. And so the Pure Land movement began uh, both as sort of an accessibility option, that, like, what about everyone else who can't, let go of house and children and farming and whatever we're doing, but also from folks who are like, this just feels really hard. And it arose during a period that was called Mappo in Japan. They thought that it was called the Dharma ending age. There were really beliefs that the world was ending because there was social turmoil, political unrest. There's a great chaos in society and a lot of fear and agitation. Um, and so there's a thought that the world is ending and we need help. And the Zen practices didn't feel accessible to a lot of the laity. But there are some formative folks like Shinran, who founded the Jodo Shinshu school, or Shin Buddhism, Nichiren, who founded the Soka Gakkai, who chant Namo Renge Kyo, like Tina Turner's practice. Some folks know it this way. Um, these folks had a similar take that, the Buddha said that awakening is possible. And what if we trust the Buddha that awakening is possible? And we follow the Mahayana sutras that speak of pure lands where if we are devoted to these pure lands, we can be reborn there. And then in those places, it's much easier to awaken. That's much more accessible. And they called this tuning into other power, tuning into the power of the Buddha and Bodhisattvas, not needing to rely on one's personal effort as the sole path of practice. And so that's where we have the terms Tariki and Jiriki. I don't think they're actually as separate, but this is how the terms came about. And I just find it really beautiful, this idea of like, this feels so hard. I don't know if I can do this, but what if I trust that it's possible? And I've seen over the years that having a fundamental trust that some change is possible is so central to our practice because it's easy to not really believe that we can change, that we can cultivate different mind states, even if we're engaging in practices. But to take time and check, like, oh, do I actually trust that something is possible, that change is possible? How can I support the faith, the trust that change is possible, and let that be the foundation of the whole practice instead of sort of an afterthought where we just go ahead, like following the breath, following the breath, following the breath, but a little voice inside is like, oh, it's not going to do any good. Um, at least for some people, that's the situation. Sometimes I've had that experience, so I know it well. Um, so I first heard these terms, Tariki and Jiriki, from one of my profs. I'm doing a master's. I did a master's in pastoral studies to get my psychotherapy license in spiritual care, and I'm doing a theological studies master because I really enjoy getting to do some academic Dharma work to flesh out the nitty-gritty of all these things I've been practicing for so long. And when the teacher used these terms, self-power and other power, something lit up in me. Once it was described, I realized it wasn't really the most novel concepts. I thought a lot about how do we develop agency, a sense of capacity in our practice? How do we cultivate determination? Aditana, one of the paramitas, the perfections or the awakening qualities. Um, it's very, very important, or the right efforts in the Noble Eightfold Path. So we think about these things all the time. The self-power. It's really central to how I learned and practiced the Dharma for so long. And then this other power could be seen as like tuning into support, right? But I think when I'd heard anything shared about other power, it was usually around beliefs. However, talking about this as sources of power really opened up something different for me. It's like, oh, wait a minute. Let's not think about what do I believe, not believe, but ask, where am I finding strength? Where am I finding power from? And usually the self-power, for better or for worse, kind of reifies this separate self, the delusion of the self. At least that's what I've seen. And the opening to other power for me has been really profound, especially as a white person raised Christian, left it, raised within capitalist white supremacist culture. Like there are a lot of ways that individualism has been really formed into myself and into my communities. So it takes some effort to learn something different. And the Buddha was very clear that a sense of a separate self is a foundational delusion that causes suffering. So it's worth challenging this and changing how we understand the self or the non-self. And there was something about other power and self-power that just kept drawing me in. And I realized um, that, yeah, so often I do fall into that striving, that trying from personal effort, but it's separate self-effort that has this limited sense. And yet it's also possible to tap into like the mountainness of the body, my connection to the earth. That's a source of strength. The vastness of the sky is a source of power. The wisdom and care of the wise and caring ancestors are sources of power. The teachings we've received from our spiritual teachers, those are sources of power. We may have a sense of connection to bodhisattvas and Buddhas or sages, saints, gods, divinity, but that's not the only path to other power. Communities that we are part of, those that inspire us, awe and wonder are sources of other power. I like to think of it as that which includes and is larger than the self. And I've been thinking and talking about this a lot in the last few months because, in a lot of ways, I feel like for a lot of folks, this does feel like a Dharma ending age. This does feel like, I mean, it's not quite the end of the world, but our temperatures are skyrocketing. There's fires, there's tornadoes, there's such climate crisis. as we have political instability and danger for folks, threats to livelihood and life, and families being separated, um, misinformation, not even knowing where to turn to know what's going on. There's something deeply unstable about this moment that is like kind of feels like medieval Japan, from what I the little bit I understand of it. And while I don't have the same conclusion or thesis of the founders of Pure Land, I don't think that other power is the only way to go. I do think that other power needs to be part of how we practice individually and collectively and engage in the world. Because at some point, if we are noticing what's happening, so I live in downtown Toronto or close to downtown Toronto, you walk out the door, there are folks in tents, folks begging for change and food. Um, there's such poverty right here and now, such desperate conditions, things that we see uh, on the media, things our family members and friends are going through, things that we're learning about that maybe we knew about, didn't know about. There's so many things that can overwhelm us and could lead to that shutdown. But overwhelm can also open us if we know how to use the overwhelm and go, I don't know how to do this, and I'm going to open, see what can help me. It can become the source of awakening. We can find that there's actually more power. We don't get limited in how am I going to figure this out? Oh, my ancestors have figured out stuff for hundreds of years. I'm going to ask them to help me. The Buddha said that awakening is possible. What if I trust that? Even if I don't know how to awaken in this moment, and I keep getting the same arguments with my kids and my spouse, and I feel like I'm losing it. But if I just trust that awakening is possible and invite that trust to somehow open me to other possibilities that I can't even imagine myself, that in the moment of letting ourselves give up, like Ananda, maybe an insight or awakening arises as our head's about to hit the pillow. I also am quite passionate about the other power teachings, because if, especially a lot of the sort of Western Dharma teachings, we avoid talking about karma, we avoid talking about rebirth, we avoid a lot of the cosmological things, the different realms. And I understand I wasn't interested in that for a long time. It felt either confusing or like I was being asked to believe something I didn't believe. Maybe like it would leave me manipulated. Um, And so I never want to suggest that anyone needs to believe something they don't believe. But but do we include in our Dharma practice not just techniques for quieting the mind, but the right view training? So there's the Noble Eightfold Path. One of the steps is to cultivate right understanding or wise view. How do we understand what suffering is, what life is, who we are, not so much as what is the self, but what's our relationship to the cosmos? Non-self is simply there is nothing that is separate here from everything else. And in cultivating a relationship with other power, it goes hand in hand with living into the insight of non-self anatta or interbeing, interconnectedness, emptiness that we would speak of in Mahayana, but it's all pointing to the same thing. Softening the reified, separate self, loosening the pressure of having everything on our own shoulders, opening up to the power that is greater than ourselves. It's all connected. I think it's the medicine that we need right now more than ever. Sometimes for me, tapping into other power is just remembering that I am one of 8 point something billion humans. And so all that I need to find is my one 8 point something billionth of humanity's efforts to respond to this moment. to relieve suffering inside, outside, until there's a point that we realize there is no inside, outside. It's all just relieving suffering. It's all just dukkha manifesting impersonal and dukkha ceasing. And we can find the strength in the elements. We can find the strength through sources of wonder, through our understanding of cosmology. So what I wanted to offer was just a few more minutes of practice. It might be more like 8 or 10 to get to play with what's it like to invite other power into our meditation, not dropping self-power. You might even kind of just be like every now and then scanning. Oh, is it like 99% self-power and 1%? Yeah, the earth is holding me. I guess that's a bit of support. Or maybe it's like 50-50, or maybe it's changing. Um, and if you have no sense of what other power even is for you, you may just spend the time meditatively contemplating, and I'll guide us through it. So really feel free to play. And if you're like, it's been a long day, I just want to sit quietly, tune out my words, follow your breath, do whatever is really supportive. But I always like to share and then apply. And then we'll open up for some conversation for those who can and those who wish. Yeah. So again, you may stay just as you are. You may want to shift your posture. Maybe it's a good time to lie down for a little bit. Good time to stand. It's just going to be under 10 minutes, so not too long for standing if that's gives a little more wakefulness or whatever supports this balance of wakefulness and ease. We'll sound the bell again. Again, tuning into this stability of body resting on earth. Breath flowing in and out of the body. And this vast sky-like consciousness that is witnessing it all. And into this spaciousness, we drop in this question: what are my sources of other or beyond the self power? I like to call it bodhisattva power. Are there groups of people that inspire you? When you think of them, you get this little boost. That's other power. Pariki. Are there landscapes? Just thinking of them, you feel comforted or strengthened or clarified. Landscapes, certain trees, even a flower shop could be sources of dhariki, other power, beyond the self-power. Sages, saints, bodhisattvas, deities, mystics, wise friends and teachers. When we spend time with them, when we think of them, when we are in devotion to them, and it gives us this little comfort, strength, inspiration, courage. These are all sources of other power beyond the self power. So, see what it's like to invite in a source or many sources of other power beyond the self power into this few minutes of meditation. Maybe just sitting with you, tapping into their aliveness. Maybe see what it's like to let beyond the self energy support the meditative practice of resting attention, not just through personal effort, but through the stability of the earth, the brilliant luminosity of the stars and the sun. Bringing those energies in to support the collecting of the mind, attention. We'll mostly be quiet for another 5, 6 minutes. I'll drop in one or two other instructions before we end. Feeling the hands of our ancestors on our backs. Kiss of Kuan Yin on the brow. Touching our hands, putting them into earth. Knowing that the breath we breathe has been breathed for millennia by all of humanity, all creatures, and being part of this web of interconnected life. Maybe that's a source of Dharma, of beyond the self power. space-time need us to be strong and need us to fall apart so that we can surrender like Ananda into awakening for all beings. Maybe find a way forward for the good of all beings. I'm going to stop the recording.